Good morning, students. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Okay. So, yesterday we discussed about the evolution of viruses, that how viruses evolve and what are the reasons, what are the factors, and what are the methods by which viruses evolve, right? So, Nehal, can you just tell me that two methods by which, just name two methods by which viruses evolve? Quickly, Nehal.
Ma'am, genetic variation and recombination.
Genetic variation and recombination. Okay. Uh, okay, Ayushi, can you tell me what is recombination?
Yes, ma'am. In recombination, viruses they swap their genetic material, either DNA or RNA, which
Mhm.
leads to the new formation of new mixed virus.
Okay, fine, good. Okay, Tanvi, can you just tell me, can you just tell me about mutation? How do viruses they evolve through mutation?
Ma'am, what?
How viruses evolve through mutations? See, recombinations and mutations are basically two methods by which viruses evolve. So early students, she's told that how they evolve through recombination. So
Ma'am,
you can tell me how they evolve through mutation.
when change occurs in DNA or RNA sequence of a virus,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay, changes occur in the RNA and DNA sequences of the viruses. Okay, fine. Manaswini, can you just tell me about recombination in influenza viruses?
Yes, ma'am. So, in influenza, there are basically 8 RNA segments, and each of them
Mm-hmm.
carry a few genes. And so, what happens is that most of the time, influenza, let's say they infect a pig cell, then different strains of the same virus can infect the same cell. When this happens, the virus can two different strains of the virus can inject their genetic material into the cell. Because of this, different segments of that genetic material can become in a way mixed up. So let's say I said there were 8 segments, right? So segments 1 to 4 can become mixed up with segments 5 to
Mm-hmm.
8 of another strain, and completely create a new strain, which would again maybe if it works in favor of the virus, then will be even more virulent and even more dangerous.
Okay, good, Manaswani. So my next question is for Yuvraj. Yuvraj, can you just tell me that what is heart therapy? We discussed heart therapy yesterday. What is the basic principle of heart therapy?
Yes, ma'am. So, heart therapy is nothing but and it is an antiretroviral treatment,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a cocktail of a different drugs, which is being used to avoid the resistance of our pathogen.
Yes.
Resistance, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, fine. That is good. So my another question is for Shakti. Shakti, can you tell me what is antigenic drift? Yes, Shakti, can you hear me? Yes, Yukta, can you answer this question? What is antigenic drift?
Ma'am, am I audible? Hello.
Yes, you're audible, Shakti.
Uh, Ma'am, can you repeat the question?
What is antigenic drift?
Okay, so in drift, basically viruses they evolve through mutations in the genes,
Mm-hmm.
and
Can you give
also,
example of any pandemic which was due to antigenic drift?
ma'am, it was influenza pandemic.
Yes, influenza pandemic was due to antigenic drift. Yes, so next question is for Ishita. Ishita, can you tell me what is antigenic shift?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, am I
Yes,
audible?
Ishita. Yeah, you're audible. Please go on.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, basically, ma'am, antigenic shift is the process
Mm-hmm.
when different strains of a virus are acting in a
Mm-hmm.
body, or we can
Yes.
say that a disease is caused by different strains of a virus.
Okay. So what happens when different strains are infecting a particular single body? Then how does antigenic shift takes place? What happens? Is there some kind of a recombination or some kind of a reassortment?
Ma'am, can I answer?
Who's this?
Ma'am, this is
Me?
Yukta.
Yes, Ikta, answer.
Ma'am, a recombinant strain is formed, which is very different from the both the ancestral strain from which the recombinant has been formed.
Mm-hmm. Asha, just tell
That's
me one major difference. What is the one difference between genetic recombination and reassortment? How do these two vary? Reassortment and recombination. Can anyone answer? Difference between reassortment and recombination. No? No idea. Okay, so this is your assignment. I discussed this yesterday in the class. So you should know when I discussed antigenic shift and drift, there we discussed this how reassortment is different than the recombination. So you'll study this yourself, right? So today's lecture will move on to next topic after evolution, and it is about the taxonomy. Yes, Manaswani.
Ma'am, I know the answer. My
Yeah,
mic wasn't
please.
working.
Yeah, go on.
So, in reassortment, first of all, reassortment can be described as a type of recombination. So,
Mm-hmm.
in reassortment, it's where, let's say, there are different segments of viruses, then
Mm-hmm.
they can just swap those segments when they are, let's say, in the same cell. So, that
Yeah.
would be reassortments, whereas recombination can be the proper exchange of the pieces where it includes physical breakage of the genetic material.
Yes, you're right. The recombination is exchange of genetic material, whereas reassortment is just swapping their segment, and there is not any exchange of genetic material within this segment. So this is the difference, right? So today again, good Manaswani. So today again we are going to discuss a very important and a very small topic, and it is about the nomenclature and taxonomy of viruses. So see why it is important to name. We all know it is very important to name anything, any organism, with any plant or any humans, wherever. So a particular organization of different groups of humans, animals, or maybe plants, or to arrange them in a proper group according to their characteristics. It is important, right? So that's how, if we identify, for example, we talk about the plants is a binomial system of a nomenclature. So whenever you identify a new plant, you know by their characteristics in which family or in which group you'll place that particular plant. Similarly, this is for the viruses also. We need to name them in certain way. We need to classify them in certain ways so that the similar kind of a viruses, they come under one particular group, one particular family, one particular order or genus, right? So this is how nomenclature or taxonomy is important, right? So in biology, how do we define taxonomy? It means the scientific study of naming, defining, and classifying groups of biological organisms based on shared characteristics. So, similar, for example, in a plant, we have a numerous families, right? We have a Cucurbitaceae family, we have a Gramineae family. You've studied in plant science too, I'm sure, right? Different families. So, different families they all are plants, but then different families have different characteristics. It could be the based on their floral formula, it could be based on their other phenotypic characters or their reproduction or whatever it's going. So on that basis they are being classified in a particular family or group. So similarly, like this is just an example of a Homo sapiens human. So how it is, how taxonomic classification is done, like they are placed in a particular domain or a proper group division used to be called earlier. Then division for, if we talk about the humans, domain or homo for Homo sapiens or humans is Eukaryota. Then kingdom is Animalia. Then phylum is Chordata. Then class is Mammalia. Then order is Primates. Then family is Hominidae. Genus is Homo. Species is Sapiens. So this is how they are being characterized. Similarly, for viruses also a certain type of a taxonomy is being followed and a nomenclature is being given. So earlier I've discussed with you, there are few certain points such as we name viruses on the basis of sometimes its symptoms, the way it is causing, or by the plant on which it is being, if we talk about the plant on which it is being identified, or sometimes on the basis of the countries also. Like for example, Ebola virus, on the basis West Nile river, West Nile yellow fever, some virus disease. So on the basis of the country names also, sometimes we name the viruses on the basis of the symptoms. For example, a smallpox virus is on the basis of a symptom, influenza virus is again on the basis of the symptoms. So on the basis of the symptoms, on the basis of their, sometimes from the place where they have been found, so on the basis of the particular area on which where they have been first identified. So this is how it has been done in the earlier times also. So nomenclature basically is a system of names or terms, or there are certain rules forming these terms in a particular field, in any field. See, nomenclature is for all kind of a living organisms or all kind of a thing. We follow a certain nomenclature for in the chemistries also, right? There's a IUPAC nomenclature which is being followed to name particular chemicals, compounds, and everything. So this nomenclature is being followed in the plants, in the animals, in the humans. Similarly, in the pathogens, fungi, in the viruses, in the bacteria. So we have particular nomenclature. So the nomen in nomenclature basically is a Latin word, and for name. Nomenclature is a system for giving names to things within a particular profession or a field. For we know about the binomial nomenclature. It has been since earlier time. It is used for the identifying, like it's a generic name and one a specific name, right? A genus and a species. So it refers to the way of referring to a living things by two names, like calling humans by Homo sapiens. So a particular nomenclature is for we have, like for plants also we have a scientific name and then we have a common name. So scientific name is a genus and a species, which is italicized when we write it, right? It is in italics. And common name is not italicized. It can be written in a smaller form also, like a proper normal forms also. So these were the some of the earlier classification that they have given, that Latin binomials were Holmes in 1939. Various other schemes were followed. Then in 1966, there was International Committee on the Nomenclature of Viruses. It was formed at that time, which they met in 1970, and they started naming and cataloging various viruses. So they started putting viruses under different groups and different families and different classification based on their characteristics. So after this lecture, we'll study the classification of the viruses, where you'll study on the basis of genome, how they are being classified, structure and genome basically, how viruses are being classified. So this committee was renamed in 1973 as International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses, and till today, after 5 years or 10 years, this committee, they meet and they see if there is some requirement for the change in the nomenclature of the viruses, if some new viruses are added, so how to name those new viruses, if some new families are to be introduced, so how to do that. So this particular committee has a people or member from many virologists from throughout the world who are the member of this ICTV, and they then sit together and they work on that how a particular new virus should be named. So if we talk about the nomenclature of the viruses, first is after the disease it caused. For example, measles virus, smallpox virus, cowpox virus, chickenpox virus, just after the name of the disease, right? Then sometimes it after the place of discovery, such as Newcastle disease virus, Marburg virus, or Ebola virus. So from the place they were first reported. So on that basis, your name. Similarly, in case of a plant virus is also tomato leaf cull Palampur virus, tomato leaf cull New Delhi virus, cotton leaf cull Allahabad virus, Allahabad which is in Pakistan, tomato leaf cull Multan virus which is again in Pakistan. So on the basis of the place also where they have been identified. Then third is on the basis of host and sign of the disease. Especially in plant viruses, also we go for that. For example, cucumber mosaic virus. Mosaic is the symptom. Cucumber was the first plant on which it was identified virus. So cucumber mosaic virus is not only infecting cucumber, it is just because it was identified on that plant first, but cucumber mosaic virus is found infecting many ornamental plants also, many other vegetables also, and many trees also. So it was named as a cucumber mosaic virus because it was first identified on the cucumber. Then Latin and a Greek word, for example, corona means crown, so we called coronavirus. Fovea virus, fovea means fit. So again, on the earlier, even today also, we call it a coronavirus. So they are being named, and there have been different ways on which these viruses have been named. And in the last, I'll also discuss that why there is certain kind of a controversies going on today. There are a few people who favor that viruses should not be named on the places where they were found, because it creates certain kind of a stigma on that particular area or a particular people who live there, that Ebola virus, for example. So they become always stamped for the Ebola virus. So they say that we should avoid naming viruses on the basis of the places they were identified, especially the human viruses, right? Then on the basis of contraction, like how dengue virus means evil spirit, we didn't. It is just a name given, some common name given by the people that some evil spirit is causing the disease. So how it is, right? So there was no defined way by which viruses were named, and that called in the need for development for the way of naming of viruses. Then the International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses, it came into existence, and it started working. They started classifying viruses based on the certain characteristics and certain other things. So International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses, they define that a virus species is a polythetic class of viruses which constitutes replicating lineages and occupies a particular ecological niche. So a class, what does a class mean? A class means they have certain properties which are common, although it's not important that one single attribute should be present in all. No, but certain properties should be common to all. Then replicating lineages means that members, they evolve within a period of a time, like viruses are evolving, but still they share a common ancestor. For example, coronavirus is one particular group. In that, there are a number of viruses, a number of new strains they keep on adding. But the group or genera or genus which we call is a coronavirus, or a coronaviridae is a family, right? Then ecological niche acknowledges the biology and property of the viruses, like what is the host range of the viruses, what kind of a host it prefer to infect, right? So all those come under this particular group. So ICTV has framed 20 rules for virus nomenclature. Among others, it recognizes common names, their international meanings, and the use of existing names. So it is not that the way the viruses have been named, so they were discarded totally. No, they are named still on the basis of the symptoms. There is a symptom in between the virus name, but then they are grouped, which we'll study in the classification. They are being grouped in different classes or a families or a genera or in groups. So this is how. So ICTB has a centralized repository of virus information. They collect information from databases around the world, facilitate the job of accurate identification and diagnosis of new and important virus diseases. For example, how we do. I work on plant viruses. So from some sample, I have sequenced a particular virus. This is how we do. We isolate RNA or a DNA. We go for a PCR, we go for a cloning, and then we sequence, right? So after sequencing only, we come to know that what kind of a pathogen, or what if this is a new virus or it is the already reported virus which is already present, right? So after sequence, I'm taking class by year. After sequencing it, after sequencing only we'll come to know that, right? So that means we'll sequence it. After sequencing, if the sequence nucleotide ended, so how do we identify whether it's a new strain? We study the sequence, we go through the different, how much it is changes it is showing on the basis of a nucleotide from the previous reported viruses. So if for different viruses, the criteria is different. For Begmo viruses, if we have less than 90% sequence similarity, we can say it is a new species. If it is 90 to 93 or 94, we can say it is the strain of the new viruses. So this is how it is being characterized. So I've identified, for example, the sequence similarity is maybe less than 80%. So that means it is altogether a new virus species, right? So I cannot myself name it as a virus. So I will tentatively name it as some virus, but then the ICTV, International Committee of Viruses, will finally decide whether this name is correct or not. I will name it tentatively. I will submit it in the database, NCBI database on the particular. There are online databases where you submit all the sequences. So within certain period of a time when this committee will meet, so they will see whether these names are fine or not, if changes are required. So if some changes are required, they will name it accordingly. But tentatively, I can name. For example, I work on apple viruses. So it is an apple chlorotic leaf virus, but it is like maybe 85% similar to previous viruses. So that means I can name it as a apple chlorotic leaf spot Noida virus. Not Noida virus because Noida, we don't have viruses. I'll definitely get samples from Shimla or Himachal, any part of the Himachal, or maybe Jammu and Kashmir. So I can name it on the basis of the naming a particular variety also, or just add a surname kind of a thing, Shimla isolate. So in this way, we can name viruses, right? So if we talk about organizational chart, they have a different executive committees. They have similarly like president and a vice president and many more people. And in this committee, there are members from most of the noted virologists from every kind of field, like a plant virology, human virology. They are the member of this particular committee, right? So objective of this particular committee are to develop an internationally agreed taxonomy for viruses, to establish internationally agreed names for virus taxa, to communicate the decision reached concerning the classification and nomenclature of viruses to virologists by holding meeting and publishing reports. So after every 5 or 10 years when they meet, right? So after that, a particular communication is in the form of a paper is being given, like ICTV meeting for this after this year, and whatever the changes they recommend in the naming of the viruses. So those things are being given in that particular paper, right? So the ICTV's essential principle are to avoid or reject the use of names which might cause error or confusion, to avoid the unnecessary creation of the new names also if it is the similar strain or order, so we don't need to do that. So we need to follow a particular classification system which use the taxa, order, family, subfamily, genus, and species. So, and when it is sometimes uncertain to classify a particular species into a genus, but its classification is in a family is clear. So we can, there are some viruses which come under unassigned species of that family, because only few characteristics are matching to that particular family, but others are different. So we don't assign them into particular genera. We just put them under some family and we just leave it at this. So those are called as an unassigned species also. Then, okay, these are like GenBank sequences like 3,142 species, which are not accounted for the ICTV report. Maybe they are not very small in number, they are not properly classified, and they are not properly identified. So they are still there to be named, right? So this is the International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses organizational chart. So they have life members, they have a national representatives and subcommittees, and they deal, each subcommittee, they deal with fungal and protist viruses. Then one committee will deal with plant viruses, another committee will deal with bacterial viruses, animal viruses, then this is on the basis of the genome, double-stranded, single-stranded RNA viruses, single-stranded RNA viruses. So there are different committees which deals with different kinds of the viruses, right? So this is how the virus taxonomy goes. It's like family. At the end, there is a viridae, particular name, for example, orthomyxoviridae, bromoviridae, potiviridae, um, number of families. So you end it by viridae basically, right? In subfamily, if there is any subfamilies, it is virinee, virinee. Example is alpha herpes virinee. So subfamily we don't have in all group, but in some cases there is a subfamily. Then genus, example influenza virus A, then herpes simplex virus. These are the genus. Species, uh, for influenza viruses, these are the same species. They don't have any different name, but there are many viruses which have a different species names also, right? Then strains are named by the numbers also, or maybe ABC, for example, influenza virus A has a different strain, B has a different strain, so they are named by different numbers. Present status of viral numbers, there are 7 orders and there are 96 families, 22 subfamilies, 420 genera and 2618 species. So it is increasing every day, or now and then new viruses are being added and number keeps on increasing. So most viruses, they have different strains. We know that strains, many viruses have mutants with different traits, or serotypes which are differentiate by antigen detection, and genotypes, they differ by the genome sequences. So in some cases, earlier names are used to define family and genera. For example, Picorna viruses become Picorna viridae also. So similar is genera name also and the family name also. Each group has suffix and printed in italics with first letter bold like fovea virus. Nowadays, it is not bold, it is single. First letter is the capital, and you do italics for your genus names also. But there are changes in this also. These days, many papers come out and where it is not compulsory to write a generic name in italics. So if you're using single genus only, you're not referring to the complete name like species and a genus, then you don't need to write in a, for example, if I'm talking about a Begmo virus, it's a genus, or a fovea virus. So it is my understanding, if I don't want to put it in a italics, it can be written as such also. Then common names are not in italic and first letter is in the lowercase. So common names we don't write in italics, right? Then in recent years, several new human infectious diseases has emerged, such as this is swine flu, Middle East respiratory syndrome. So it was first identified in Middle East, so it was named as a Middle East respiratory syndrome. These kind of a names, they say they have a negative impacts by we are stigmatizing certain communities or economic sectors. This is just a WHO person, assistant director general, who gave his term that we should not do this. So this may seem like a trivial issue to some, but disease names really do matter to the people who are directly affected. So the WHO also forms a certain guidelines for the naming particular disease pathogens. So they also say that we should avoid the name of a particular city or a particular place, because that stigmatize that particular people or a group of a people or that particular area, those people who are living in that area, right? So certain diseases, they name provoke a backlash against member of a particular ethnic communities, or this might affect their livelihoods, or in certain kind, like Ebola was identified in a Ebola, a particular part of the Africa, right? So the first thing that comes to mind is like, okay, those people were the first who got infected by these viruses or who got affected. So a sort of negative impact or negative point comes to the mind of the people. So best practice means that disease name should consist of a generic names based on the symptoms. For example, respiratory diseases, neurologic symptoms, other on the basis of the symptoms. And the more specific names when only should be given when we know more information about that particular pathogen is available, right? Progressive disease is a juvenile disease or a severe disease, so then only we can add. So if the pathogen causes disease is known, it should be named coronavirus. If we know coronavirus, so definitely it is a coronavirus. Influenza virus, it has a different strains, but still it is known as an influenza virus, right? So by that name also it can be known. So terms that should be avoided in disease name should be geographic locations, for example, Middle East respiratory syndrome, Spanish flu, Rift Valley fever, people's name, like Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It is a disease which is called by prion. I mean, it was on the name of the first person who was found to be infected by this kind of the new kind of a disease, right? So we should avoid those diseases. Then species of animal or a food, swine. They say we should also avoid swine flu, bird flu, and monkeypox and all these things. Also, for some reason, they say it's not right to name on particular, uh, particular animal. Also we should avoid those things, so they should be named on the basis of the symptoms that is causing, and on the basis of the genera we can name. So best practice for disease naming according to them is it should be consist of, okay, this table are not included, I might include, but it consists of a generic descriptive terms and a specific names. Generic descriptive terms may be more useful when information is available on the disease or syndrome, and those terms for respiratory disease, hepatitis, watery diarrhea. So these commonly these names can be used. Then specific descriptive terms should be used whenever the information available is considered sufficiently robust and the vast changes due to epidemiology or clinical picture are unlikely to occur. For example, progressive diseases or juvenile diseases, severe diseases, we can add these terms. So if the causative pathogen is known, it should be used as a part of the disease name. So novel coronavirus, respiratory syndrome, H7N9, rabies virus, like malaria, polio virus, dengue virus. So we are adding the name of the particular disease and along with that virus. So this is how we can go for the naming. Similarly, if we talk about the naming by place, in like I told you earlier, tomato leaf curl Palampur virus. So this was named, tomato leaf curl virus has been already identified from many parts in India also, like tomato leaf curl New Delhi virus is another strain. So why the tomato leaf curl Palampur virus was named? It was identified from the Palampur area, and it was named as because the genome sequences, or we can say the variability at the nucleotide level was less than 90 or 92% at that time was, right? So it was it was known as a new virus, right? So that was named as a tomato leaf curl Palampur virus. Then we have a tomato leaf curl New Delhi virus. Similarly, in cotton leaf curl disease, it's cotton leaf curl disease is under which 5 to 6 cotton leaf curl viruses are come. So they are like Multan virus, Allahabad virus. They are on the basis of India also, Allahabad virus. So number of viruses. So these are being named on this basis also, right? So this is about how do we name viruses. The major thing is when we nomenclature and taxonomy after is the classification. So nomenclature and taxonomy are related to the classification also. So in the next lecture, we'll study about the classification. So there are number of classifications which are being given by various people. So whatever Baltimore classification we follow, right? There are 2-3 classifications which are more commonly being followed, and they're the way they have described and classified the viruses is they are in much better way as compared to the other people. So in the next lecture, we'll try to go for the classification of the viruses. So this was a small lecture just to tell you about how nomenclature of the viruses is being done. How do we name viruses basically? So we name viruses on the basis of the symptoms and on the basis of the diseases. We name them still on the basis of the places also, though there's a controversy regarding this, that we should not name them on the basis of the places they have been identified or the place from they have been identified. So but still it is not like banned, or it is not like we should not do this. So there's no guideline regarding this, that we cannot name viruses on the basis of the on the basis of the place they have been identified. As and when if we get guidelines for this, like these people, they have proposed this thing that this should be done this way. So if ICTV and other committees, if they approve this, that okay, we will not name viruses on the basis of the places they are causing diseases, so then it can be taken seriously, and then people will stop and people will drop the place name out of the viruses. Otherwise it is still going on that way, right? So that's all from my side. If there's any confusion, you can ask your question. Otherwise, I'll move to the assignment which was given to you last Friday. And now I see that most of the students, they have submitted their assignment. but still one student, I guess Athoiba, yes, Athoiba has not submitted his assignment, whereas others have submitted their assignment. So we still have some time, so we can discuss this assignment. Let's hear out your views, what you say about these origin of viruses. Yes, Sam, you wanted to discuss something that day, right? So can you just say your view? What is your view for origin of viruses, and why, if it is different from the present views, why it is so? On what basis? And this is open to discussion for everyone also, whether you agree with his view or you still have some other kind of thoughts on this. Yes, Sam, please switch on your camera and you can discuss.
I'm audible.
Yes, Sam, you're audible.
Ma'am, so the three hypotheses all had some limitations, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a limitation was that how did they make the capsid? Then there was
Mm-hmm.
like in how did if like how did the original bacteria had that much genome in that small virus particle?
Mm-hmm.
There was what Manas said, that the first cell theory, that how can a virus be independently,
Independent,
right?
yes.
So uh, like I took the different approach of like
Mm-hmm.
trying to solve the limitations. So I came up
Mm-hmm.
with the prion hypothesis and
Mm-hmm.
reverse translation. So basically, in prion hypothesis, so everybody here knows what's a prion, and instead of DNA and RNA, which are like the important for storage, they couldn't survive in the climatic conditions of the archaic.
Mm-hmm. Can you see
So
my screen? I'm sharing my screen. Sam, this is your
yeah,
Word file.
yeah. So the proteins, in some situations, the proteins were surviving in those conditions,
Mm-hmm.
and even showed. A minute, let me open. And even showed like in inheritance in a non-Mendelian manner. So, based on these theories, the prion being the first cell, first form of life in a planet, was made, and
Mm-hmm.
I added the reverse translation hypothesis to this, because
Mm-hmm.
reverse translation hasn't been proved yet, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's also an hypothesis. But there is a product called Paprika, which is under development, and it
Mm-hmm.
needs to make proteins from proteins to RNA and DNA. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, reverse of central dogma.
Yeah, this is
That's the limitation
reverse
to
of.
what in central dogma. So
Mm-hmm.
by this, a prions can and prions can easily bind to nucleic acid, and the proteins can, by reverse translation, make the protein capsid. So
Mm-hmm.
the capsid part is like the limitation is gone, and because proteins can make nucleic acid, so it can also make large number of nucleic acids. And because prions are cells, and in this way, it's not only viruses, but prions could have also been made bacteria and other uh,
Mm-hmm.
organisms. So virus could come up later stage and could have joined and with a bacteria like bacteriophages and all.
Okay. Okay, fine. Okay. Okay, Sam. Yes, other students, how do you take this hypothesis? Manaswani, do you have something to comment on this?
Ma'am, on Sam's,
Ah.
I read his assignment and it was much more detailed than I expected it to be. But um, whatever he's written and summarized, since there are also examples. Usually, that
Mm-hmm.
I think is, we can consider that evidence, right? Saying
Mm-hmm.
that. So I think that the examples definitely support his hypothesis a lot. So yeah, even I agree with this, but I didn't know about it yet, and then he showed me his report, and
Okay, no,
I
that's
agree with
fine.
it as well.
That's fine. See about prions. What we know very less about the prions. Prions, we just know that they are just the proteins, misfolded form of the proteins, and how they get into the they cross the blood brain barrier is still not known. But yes, once the prion infected proteins, they come in contact with the healthy proteins. There are basically two types, like healthy PR proteins, they are already in our body, but when the infected, they come in contact with these prion forms, they replicate themselves. So but how does this come and how does these bind? It is still a very difficult part. But yes, I agree with the Sam, the way he's saying that, okay, we are talking about like it could have happened. Just a moment, huh? Just a moment, there's some noise coming. Okay, sorry for that. There's a lot of background noise actually. So yes, see, what we discussed when we discussed the three theory for the origin of the hypothesis, at that time also, we no one was sure. Rather, the people who proposed those theory, they were hypothesis. It was just a hypothesis, and for every hypothesis there was a negative point which proved that this is not right, or which can prove that this theory cannot be right. So yes, Sam, I still agree to you, and this was a good with the point wise explanation that you have given, that this could have happened and this could be the reason for the hypothesis for the origin of the viruses. So this is something new which you have told us, and yes, you have used your mind, and that means you have studied for this, and you came up with this your hypothesis. We'll call it Sam's hypothesis, right? So we can do that, right? Yes. So anyone else would like to explain? If someone's, I've not read all the answers or that you have posted, but anyone with a different kind of a thinking or a different kind of a hypothesis for origin, so they can tell me. किसका मैं open करूं? Okay, Manaswini, let me open your, what was in yours? So you were okay, you gave the three hypotheses and you said okay, it was basically you explained these three hypotheses. Anyone else? Vivek, Yuvraj, Tridev. Okay, fine. So see, I have one paper for this origin of viruses, maybe of a little higher standard, but still I'll post it on the LMS or on the Teams also. Just try to go through that paper. So they have also given a different kind of a hypothesis for the origin of the viruses, and these they say that, see, since viruses we cannot, they don't have any kind of a fossil, so we don't have anything which tell us about their origin, right? So how we can much in a much more way we can identify the origin of the viruses if we study in detail about their genome, molecular studies, and the structural studies. So if structural studies and the molecular studies can be done for the viruses, so from those studies, definitely we can come to some one conclusion that this is the way the viruses might have originated. Otherwise, it is a long debate and competition which is still going on, right? So, okay, no one has to add anything. Anyways, we are left in this first module. We are left with, I guess, the classification of the viruses. So, classification of the viruses will be the last topic of the module. So as I told you earlier also, that after the module, one module will be done, so there will be one assessment, right? So let's give this assessment in the form of a, it could be a class test, it could be a presentation, or it could be some other form also, right? So as please start preparing you this module. So I can ask you for a presentation in the form of a paper, not the theoretical things that I've told you. I'll ask you for a paper presentation, right? Or a class test. So keep preparing your module. So by next week, most probably in any day, we can have your test. Or if the presentation you have to prepare, that I'll tell you maybe 2-3 days advance. By the end of this weekend, I'll tell you if you have to prepare presentation. Otherwise, start preparing for this as a test, right? So next week, first assessment for this module we are going for, right? So please switch on your cameras for your attendance also, right? Yes, do we have Adhish Mishra?
Yes, present.
Yes, Athoiba,
Present, ma'am.
Ayushi,
Present, ma'am.
Sam,
Present, ma'am.
Devanshi,
Present, ma'am.
Ishita,
Present, ma'am.
Janvi,
Present, ma'am.
Kshitij,
Present, ma'am.
Manaswani,
Present, ma'am.
Namrita,
Present, ma'am.
Nandini, Nehal,
Present, ma'am.
Rupal,
Present, ma'am.
Sahiba,
Present, ma'am.
Sanjana,
Present, ma'am.
Sahiba, I took your name.
Yes, ma'am.
Shakti, yeah,
Present, ma'am.
Shakti, present. Shivani, yes, Shivani. Tanvi, नहीं, शिवानी के बाद हाँ, yes, Tanvi Sharma.
Present, ma'am.
Tridev,
Present, ma'am.
yes. Then we have after Tridev, we have Vivek, Yukta,
Present, ma'am.
and Yuvraj.
Present, ma'am.
Yes, guys, you should open your cameras while discussions and attendance. And it's good to see you. You know, we used to in olden days, we can say that we used to meet face to face. But yes, since we are taking classes online, so it's good to see the students. And Nandini Raj, what happened, Nandini? Network issues. Fine, Nandini, I'll download the attendance, right? So I'm sure you all are enjoying your classes. If there's any problem or anything, you can always let us know in the mentor-mentee meeting or by any other means, right? You know how to contact your teachers. I don't need to tell you, right? So see you then maybe day after tomorrow we have a class, right? Thank you so much, students.
Thank
Excuse
you,
me.
ma'am. Thank you.
जसलीन क्या हो गया था?